Okay, maybe we should start, Micah. Is that good? Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this GGP Connect webinar. Now, this is a new series that we started a few months ago in order to, as part of our new round of data collection, and showcase the work of our teams in countries and regions who can share with us their experience and insights. So today we're delighted to pass the floor to the Hong Kong team. But before I do so, let me just remind you how we function. They're going to have 20 minutes to present. This will be followed by 20 minutes of question and answer with the attendees. Once this is done, I will close formally the webinar, but if you by that time have more questions for us, you can stay online, and we will ourselves and our guests today will also stay online in order to answer further questions. And remember to do so by your question throughout the seminar, just put them on the Q&A. Or you can also, when we officially open the discussion period, you can also raise your hand with the hand button. So without further delay, let me introduce you to both Stuart Gietel-Basten and Joy Cruz, who have been very brave in doing this pilot in Hong Kong, and we look so much forward to hearing about their results. So I pass it on to you, Stuart.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. I don't know what we've been brave. I don't think we want to talk about why we've been brave. In Hong Kong, everything is brave, seems to be these days. But anyway, and also your Dutch is getting so much better. You pronounce my name perfectly. It's really amazing. Thank you so much. So anyway, it's a very big hello from us on the other side of the world to many of you here in Hong Kong. Myself and Joy, who's on my screen down there, are very happy to be with you today. And this is really work which we couldn't have done this without Joy. Her work on this has been really magnificent, so we're really presenting this together, and Joy will come in the conversation later on. So I thought before I start to directly talk about Hong Kong, I just want to take a little bit of a step back and talk more broadly about GGS in Asia, and the kind of the rationale for even beginning to think about this in Hong Kong. Of course, we've seen GGS in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan, and in the past, the round which has been formed in Japan. But really, there is a broader rationale for kind of expanding this understanding of fertility and family change in East and Southeast Asia, as we see them. And in fact, really, if we're looking at in terms of key sites of low TFR, the biggest population in the world, which would have what we might call a low fertility rate, is in East and Southeast Asia. And we do feel that there is a kind of urgent need for this kind of comparative understanding, because at the moment what international comparative studies are done are based purely on a kind of conceptual qualitative approach in terms of our similarities in some parts of the rest of the low fertility world on gender roles, for example, or intergenerational systems, but without a more
sorry,
yeah?
You need to share your screen.
Oh,
you haven't shared your screen.
I was so excited. There we are. I'm so sorry. And and when we had the run through, I was like, I don't even need to practice this. I shared my screen 1,000 times. I'm a lecturer. Oh my goodness, I've gone red now. Thank you. Do you see what I mean? I can't do anything without Joy. So yeah, you didn't miss much. It's just what I said. Look, there's the start. Okay. When we think about gender roles and intergenerational systems, but then really to look at this more systematically from a theoretical perspective, are there more than one tracks or approaches of fertility transition, right? When we look to a low fertility world in the 21st century, which is a middle income, even a low income, low fertility world, is that different to the track of fertility transition that we've seen elsewhere? So this is really our rationale for looking at a GGS in Asia. But of course, it's not always that straightforward. Compared, I think, to Europe, we have bigger challenges, I would say, with regional coordination. I'm not just saying that just because I'm British, that we have this kind of challenge in terms of the lack of a kind of a pan-Asian or East or Southeast Asian research fund, a supranational organization, the coordination between demographic institutes, governments, organizations, and so on. Yes, of course, we have ASEAN, but the research side of ASEAN is relatively limited. We also have issues of path dependency in countries such as South Korea, for example, where we've had very long runs of related surveys relating to fertility, families, and so on. If these have been running 50 or 60 years, as they have in some cases, then it's the kind of a big ask to be the civil servant who says, no, we're going to get rid of that and we're going to do something different. And look, it's from abroad and it's European and it asks questions in a different way. That's a big ask and that's tough. Also, attitudes towards comparison. Why do we need to compare? This, of course, is not only the case in this part of the world, but it can often seem quite strong. And even in some ways, a cultural or even a political resistance to comparing. It somehow demeans the sense of integrity of the research community or of a cultural system. And of course, in many ways, we are a little bit behind Europe, a lot behind Europe in terms of data sharing and in terms of open data and sharing the fruits of our work with the rest of the world. So we wanted to do some of this work in East Asia, and of course it makes sense to start closest to home here in Hong Kong. We have one of the lowest fertility rates in the world. We don't have, at the moment, we don't have any kind of thing like GGS. We don't have an aging survey. We do have very high rates of digital penetration, which I'll talk about more in a moment. We don't really have a history of large scale online surveys, so there's nothing really beyond what market research or panel work do. The major survey kind of organizations within universities that are currently present tend to be the more traditional kind of CAPI approach. And also we don't have a population register. We only have a household register here in Hong Kong, which makes life a little bit complicated as well. So the kind of questions that we were trying to ask when we were setting up and going about GGS in Hong Kong is, so firstly, like, given these very high rates of digital penetration, and also given the fact that in the middle of a pandemic, knocking on people's doors is not really actually legal, in fact. So we have to approach this in a slightly different way. So of course we're interested in looking at the push to web experiments. I presume everyone on this seminar doesn't need me to talk about the push to web approach within the GGS context, but anyway, for those who are not familiar, this is within other contexts in Europe of pushing, of trying to move towards an online modality. So basically our questions are, you know, how does it work? How can it work? Will it work in Hong Kong? And what are the best incentives? And so we might see some kind of be able to judge the answer to that question through our response rates. And the second question is, will people actually, is it about the content, right? So will people actually answer the question, right? Will people just log on and then disappear and then just say, well, this is not for me, I don't like it, it's too personal? So this is a kind of more of a cultural exploration. Can we take this survey, which has been predominantly run, developed, etc., in Europe, and certainly in non-Asian settings, and apply it here? And so to get a sense of whether or not we've been successful in that, we obviously would look at the response rate, but then also the cutoff, the drop-off rate, and then of course the data, right? The content that we find. Does it seem to make sense in that regard? And then finally, like, the bigger question why we would do a pilot is like, how do we do a full first wave, right? What works? What doesn't work? What is the best ways to do this? And also in very practical terms, if we're going to ask the government or sort of research funder for some money, you know, how much do we want realistically, right? How much is this actually going to cost us? So we set about organising a pilot survey here in Hong Kong, pilot GGS, and just to give you a few kind of practical terms, practical things here. So we decided. So we, of course, we got the questionnaire in English, and then we translated this into traditional Chinese. So for those of you may not know, there are at least two, basically two main types of written Chinese: simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese, and then different languages and dialects that we have in all across China. In mainland China, the written is simplified Chinese. In Hong Kong, it is traditional Chinese. So we use traditional Chinese and English. Now we then, so having translated the survey, we went through a kind of quite extensive process of beta testing, both in terms of the translation that we've done, but then also the kind of transliteration, right? The conceptual meaning of what we're talking about. So, you know, of course, you know, for example, we will have very particular expressions and terms and in the census, particular categories that will directly need to be translated in a different way. But there's also about how one conceptualizes of particular terms and so on. So that took quite a bit of time. And this was done in 3 different stages. So firstly, beta testing with our office staff here, and then to their friends, and then to their friends' friends. So by which time we don't really know who they are, right? So this is, it will be far away. Basically, I'm trying to say, it's not just tested by sociologists in the university, right? This is a much broader set of beta testers. And then we went about trying to think about how we're actually going to do this. And this is where it becomes a little bit complicated. We find out all sorts of new and interesting things. Like it's illegal to send cash in Hong Kong. Never knew that. Our purchasing office, sorry, at the university, we talk in acronyms all the time. Bureau, that means our purchasing office. They got very upset about possibly just giving money away and not having it signed off with a passport or with an ID card or whatever. So we had to find certain ways around that. And in the end, they were very helpful in the end. And so we have supermarket vouchers for our incentives for one of the basically 2 or 3 cartels that run retail shopping in Hong Kong, and we went with one of them who gave us a 5% discount. So this is one of the main supermarkets in Hong Kong, and we post them out registered posts. So that was the way to kind of see that people have effectively signed for and received these coupons. And then our population was permanent residents, aged 18 to 59. We used the last birthday method. So the respondent in the household, I'll show you the letter later, whoever had the last birthday. And we also wanted to do an incentive experiment. This is basically to look at this idea of conditional or unconditional, what would be the most effective. And yet again, I think, you know, I'm not trying not to be explicit about this, but I think we're really doing new things, right? We're really trying to push the boundaries of what has been done before in this part of the world. The majority of these surveys, these incentive experiments have been done in Western context. Very, very, very few, if any, have been done in an Asian context. And so, you know, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, cash, unconditional incentives and higher amount incentives are more effective, increasing response rates. But then the combination of unconditional or conditional incentives and lower dropouts are also important as well. So we wanted to try and explore those different issues. And so just to put some numbers on this here, so in terms of their household register, the government estimated that the ineligibility of the household registered. That would be to people who we sent it to register households who would have nobody eligible within our population, either because they are above or below basically above the age, only above the age group, or because they're non-residents, non-permanent residents would be ineligible. My own household is ineligible because we're non-permanent residents. But anyway, this is estimated at 17.9%. So our target net sample was 2,000. So our gross sample, I'll show you in a minute how we got to that number, was just under 8,000. We had 10 incentive groups, and in total, 27,534 letters sent out. And as I'll show you in a minute, this was not sent out by a machine. This was sent out by Joy and our team here using a sponge, well, not just using one sponge, right, to lick the envelope, right, using a lot of sponges. And of course, it didn't all go perfectly. We discovered when we took them down to the post office that we stuck the registered post stickers in the wrong place. So we had to unstick and then restick 2,734 stickers in Wong Tai Sin post office. There we are. They even set up, they're very friendly at Hong Kong Post. They set up a nice little table for us. We got a nice production line going, and my finger was still pink. I mean, my finger's already pink, but it was really pink for about a week afterwards, with us re-sticking all of these stickers. These were the letters that we sent out. Actually, this is a reminder letter here with of course, we just have the occupant and the data and the address. There it is in English and in Chinese. Then respondents were sent to this website. It's just a kind of, it looks like this anyway. It's just ggs.hk. We registered a very simple name here. All of the information was in Chinese first, and then in English as well. And this is really quite a a team affair. This is our team here. All of the people who worked on our project, all in-house here at HK UST. This is Joy managing the envelopes. This is my daughter, you'll see here, who wanted to get involved in this. These are the famous sponges, which I've already referred to. This is, we do it all ourselves. We put the stuff in the back of a car. It's like a Tesla that looked like a Batmobile. We drive it down to Wong Tai Sin post office. This is quite a very Hong Kong scene, a very local Hong Kong scene. And here's the post office on the left. Oh, sorry, zooming. Here we are in said post office, counting them out. Doing another thing we didn't realize: post in Hong Kong is all decentralized. Everything is done at the post office level, so there's not some central main sorting office, and apparently they can only handle 50 registered mail a day. So when we dropped down 2,734, well, of course, actually they had to take on extra staff at the post office. So again, it's kind of unsung heroes who never really get a look in. But the people at the Wong Tai Sin post office, we couldn't have done it without them if they hadn't have taken on extra people. So it just really shows the kind of the team effort that we have here. And we had some modest advertising around. We had the logo on Twitter, social media, and here it is on our e-board in the university. Not everything goes to plan, of course. We get a lot back. Here are some of the registered mail that comes back. We had a few notes like this. So people are very honest and very kind. Here's one person who said, I'm 75. I can't do the survey. My children don't live with me. I'm sending you back the voucher. So this was an unconditional incentive, and the respondent sent the voucher back to us and was very sorry about this. Anyway, I'll just now go to the results, right? So of what we have at the moment. Now, it is live, so these aren't the final results. We've still got another 3 weeks remaining, but we wouldn't expect to see probably a major change after this. So here you can see this, the different incentive groups here, so unconditional and conditional, and the different samples. So the samples in some way partly are based upon cost, but then also based upon what we might anticipate as a best case scenario. We've already sent 3 reminders out for this, and these are in Hong Kong dollars. So 50 Hong Kong dollars is about £5, which these days is probably about €5 as well, but I don't know, maybe €6 or something like this. So 50 is €6, 10 is about 100 is about €12, 150 is about €18. So you can see the different groups there. So in terms of the raw response rate, so this is just calculating the number of responses we get back over the sample. You can see that our best performer is indeed, as the literature which was suggested, it's very satisfying, which is an unconditional of 50 and a conditional of 100, and then we get up to nearly 40%. And then we have this kind of group in the middle between kind of 32 and 36%, which is a mixture of unconditional, which perform well, and this 50 plus 50 unconditional and conditional, which performs pretty well. In terms of kind of value for money, one might say, well, an unconditional of 50. So if you look at the pink one there, I just think this is fascinating that, you know, basically an unconditional of 50 versus a conditional of 150 is giving you more or less the same. It's actually better to have an unconditional of 50, which I just think is really very interesting. And then all the way down to a control group of 7.8%. The lottery, I should say, was iPads. I think 3 iPads. I think we had. Is that right, John? Yeah, 3 iPads. Now, then, of course, we have to adjust for eligibility. So this is just a simple 18 or 17.9% or 18.9% I mentioned earlier. So this will be our first adjusted response rate, and that then takes it up to about 47% for the best performing group, and then 39 to 43 and so on, where you can see the numbers. You can see the numbers there. And then the last adjustment, which is possible to do, is to adjust for those non-deliverable registered mail. So we got a lot of these mail back, so then we can take those off from the denominator because they were in fact they were not refused, they were just never even received, right? But this doesn't really make much difference anyway. This is only 1 or 2%. But so we're basically up in our best performing group at around 47%. In terms of the responses, the vast majority were in Chinese. So some were in English, but the vast majority were in Chinese. And then this one, which Arieka kindly presented and made Joy and I blush at the GGS meeting a few weeks ago. These are our break-offs compared to some of the other recent cowies, and you can see that we do really well. Actually, our break-offs are fairly low. We managed to get about 80% through to completion in the end. So just in the last kind of 2 minutes or so, I just wanted to say kind of what's left to do and our next steps here. So obviously, before we get too kind of carried away by this, we've got to look at what the data actually are and whether it's just whether it's any good or not. This is kind of, you know, before we get too carried away. So we have to do that, and of course we've got to see what we could do with it. But without sounding too complacent, we're not complacent at all, our response rates and our completion rates do seem to be pretty good. I'm a demographer, right? I'm not in the survey methodology world. I don't know what reviewer 2 is going to make of a response rate of 47%. I really don't. But I think for what but when I look around the world at what other surveys have been able to achieve, I think we've done pretty well here in Hong Kong. Conceptually, methodology push to web seems to work in Hong Kong, so then that of course opens this up to other opportunities beyond GGS for Hong Kong for developing survey methodology here in Hong Kong. And of course, it's our hope to be able to move to a full first wave as soon as possible. I say cash dependent. It is, of course, cash money dependent, but it's also dependent on other things like our combined capacity to be able to do this as soon as possible. And it's our hope as well to have a matching aging survey in Hong Kong as well over the next few years. So one of the harmonized share ELSA style aging survey. And then I guess because I started with thinking about GGS Asia more generally, what about the region as a whole? Well, you know, I think methodologically and conceptually, we could say, I think, that in areas with high digital penetration, as I put on the screen here, I think the results from Hong Kong suggested it could be done. Right, I think that methodologically and conceptually, the content of the survey is appropriate, and people do seem to be responding to it. Of course, before we see the data, we don't know for sure, but that it seems to be the case. I put China, mainland China, in brackets there because, of course, China's development scale is very broad, and we have to be conscious of that. Not everywhere is like Shanghai. Not everywhere is like Gansu. Right? It's a very broad development spectrum. But you know, culturally, politically, you know, people are answering fairly sensitive, quite personal questions at the moment, and I would say doing so in Hong Kong at a time where you know, trust is not necessarily massively high. Trust in different institutions and organisations is not very high at the moment. We were able to do this as a university. We were able, and as I say, the responses and the results seem to be pretty positive. But this is not going to be the same across the region. We're going to have similar issues across the region. And of course, obtaining samples and the different challenges that I discussed earlier, just, you know, the cultural acceptance of doing GGS is still there. So even though we can show methodologically and conceptually in an East Asian region a very low fertility that GGS seems to work, I'm still not jumping for joy and excited that we will see it roll out. It's going to be easy to roll out across the region. But, you know, we're trying, and there are already projects, funding projects which are on the go at the moment. We have exploratory projects in Mongolia and in Thailand to explore how conceptually and feasible the survey will be to do down there. Anyway, that is the end of my talk. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope that was not uninteresting.
Wonderful. This is great, and I love the personal touch and the great dedication of the Hong Kong team. So time to turn to the audience and the attendees. So as a reminder, you can raise your hand using the raise hand button, or you can ask your question in the Q&A and I'll read it. So we had the first question coming from our colleague Nobu Fukuda from Japan, who was curious about how long the questionnaire, and especially if you did the whole baseline questionnaire or not.
The whole job lot, the whole thing. In English and Chinese, we don't know yet. I guess we can find. We don't know the average amount of time. Yeah, I don't think, Joy. We don't have that information yet. The average amount of time, but yeah, it's got to be, as you would expect, nearly an hour. And also, we don't know what medium it was before, whether it was done on phones, whether it was done on a tablet, a laptop. We don't know that information yet, but it was done.
Thanks. Question from Brianna Pirelli Harris. Brianna, if you want to ask your question.
Hi, thanks, Stuart. This is really, really interesting. I think one of the differences that you might have had, which I think a lot of push-to-web doesn't use, is the registered post. And I was wondering to what extent you think that that makes a difference, because people actually have to do something kind of official in order to receive it. And in some ways, it's a really great idea, because then they know that it's serious and that they're getting something from the registered post. So also, did they have to be there in order to sign for it? And what happened if nobody was ever there? Did they just get returned back, I suppose? But how many tries and attempts were there to get that signature?
So yeah, I think that's a very good point, actually, Brian. I guess the only, and of course we are, when we're comparing the conditional, sorry, the unconditional and the ones where we don't send anything out, we have two variables, right? So we have the money in there and we have the registered. Well, I guess what we could or should have done is to have a registered a registered letter, but with nothing in there, right? With no voucher. Then we would be able to assess the impact of the registered mail there, but we didn't do that, and we should have done that, right? That's a great idea, but you know, there we are. That's life, I'm afraid. In terms of the delivery, I don't know if Joy can come in here, and Joy knows a little bit more about this. My understanding is that actually, Joy, do you know the answer to this?
Yeah, so if for the registered mails, so if there's no one in the house or in the quarter, the postman, leaves sort of a claim card. And the registered mail is like lodged in the nearby post office for a few days before it's returned back.
Is it very common to get registered mail from strangers or official agencies or anything like that?
Usually you get registered mails, usually from official communication like banks and from the government. So usually Hong Kong residents go out of their way to claim in the nearest post office.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking that might be a really interesting technique to implement, because then people know this is serious. But then on the other hand, in the UK, people would be rather surprised to be getting some registered mail out of the blue. But maybe we should experiment with it. It's a really interesting idea.
However, cost-wise, our costs became more expensive because of that. Because the regular mail is only $2 Hong Kong, and then for the registered mail, it's $17.50.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's a huge.
So the difference, it's a huge cost difference.
Yeah, so we'll have to see if that's worthwhile. Can I just ask also about the ineligible households and at what point they were picked up? Do people have to open up? It's a relatively high percent, but I suppose it was all filtered out once they had opened up the mail, and then did they answer the survey if they were ineligible and then you just dropped them? Or
Yeah, so I think that so that figure of 18.9%. So this is what the government tells us we should be expecting from this residence quarters, right? So this is not it's not 18.9% of the survey completed were completed by ineligible residents. I don't think we have. But my expectation is that probably, because we're very clear about this, 95% of the responses would have been completed by eligible respondents. It's just that because we had a household register and we're only focusing on permanent residents and people aged 18 to 59, if that 18.9% is basically the percentage of the addresses that we sent to where the government tells us that there would be nobody eligible, but they can't tell us, or they won't tell us, what those addresses are. So we still have to send it out.
Right, yeah, because I think that's also a cost that we're considering too, is do you send unconditional vouchers to people who are, say, over the age limit? Is there any way to get around that? And then do you give them a conditional if they are over the age limit and they have filled it out anyhow?
I think that's a good point, and things like that are the kind of things that you have to take time to convince a purchasing office, right, that I'm going to send free money to somebody who I don't want to complete my survey, but I don't know who they are. And you just, I think that all you can do is factor that in as like a sunk cost, because there's not really much alternative. If they do fill out the form, I mean, so actually, if people have, we have had quite a lot of cases actually where people have posted back the conditional voucher, the unconditional voucher. They've sent it back, even, and in fact, some people have even posted it back to us with registered mail. Right? So they've gone to the post office, put this in a new envelope, put it in registered mail, pay $17.5 of their own cash to post it back to us, which is kind of amazing, right? I think it's kind of amazing, so that, but we don't expect that now. And if people do that, and they send that back to us, then we write them a letter to say thank you, right? We send them a note to say, you didn't need to do that, but we appreciate it. That's very kind of you.
Yeah.
And also I should say we do have we have another assistant on the team, Ling Ling, who is from Hong Kong, so speaks Cantonese, is a native Cantonese speaker, so the phone line was there, so anybody who had any doubts, it's like, is this really legit, what's this about, would be able to ring Ling Ling up and get an answer straight away. And I think it's a selection of little things like that, that shows that it's serious. Like our envelopes have the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology on it and the logo, and at the bottom the Centre for Aging Science. We did it in Chinese. It's really, I know it sounds obvious, but it's very important, right? We have the website is simple. I think it's just a kind of configuration of these little things which together may have worked quite well. But I do think this, sorry, the last thing, Bria, sorry, I'm rattling on, but this this registered delivery, this recorded delivery, I think that could be very interesting. But again, it's got to be kind of context specific, that in Hong Kong, if you get registered letter and you've got to go to the post office, there's no big deal, right? You're never more than like 5 or 10 minutes from a post office, wherever if you're going around town, right, you can go to the post office. Now, on the other hand, if my mum gets a registered mail in Driffield and she's got to drive to Bridlington to the sorting office for this mysterious package and pick this up, and it's a letter, then she gets the letter and it's just telling her that she's not eligible to take a survey, she's got to drive back to Driffield, then this can go. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of, I think, again, it's got to be kind of the context specific as well. Yeah.
So it's something to really keep in mind. Great. Well, thanks for sharing this. Bye.
Thanks. We have a question from Arike Ragen. Arike.
Okay, thanks for your talk. To come back to this issue of the ineligible people over 59, why would you not just let them fill in the survey? Because you spend the money anyway, except for that some people send the voucher back. This is something actually that, I don't know, Brianna or Olga from the UK team thought of in a recent meeting with them. So why wouldn't you include them? Because the survey is, also, you wouldn't have to change the survey.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think our motivation in that sense, though, was that we, with our sample size and for the pilot, we did want to get this, at least a decent understanding of this one population, right? And if we were to get, there is also, there are co-residence is not entirely inconsequential in Hong Kong, and so there could be quite a few, there are quite a few intergenerational households where you would have many people aged above 59, and so we could run the risk of having quite a large group where we could have had respondents aged 18 to 59, but instead we got, because we're using this last birthday method, we would have got many respondents aged above 59. But we're learning all the time. I mean, if there's a way, when we do when we do the full wave, or if we do the full wave, then we can look at different ways to manage precisely those kind of issues, and how we write the letter, how we write the invitation.
Okay.
And Stuart, in the chat, there's a question from Waven Lay, who is asking, what was your motive for not including non-permanent residents, like migrants from mainland China? And thinking here that it's not a very small group.
Yeah, so in terms of, so for non-permanent residents, so this is going to be, so actually migrants from mainland China would respond, right? It was for permanent residents and for the, I can't remember the exact expression, but it's but basically migrants from mainland China would be entitled to respond. The only people really, there's two big groups of people, or two, well, not even big groups of people, one big group of people and one small, relatively small group of people who would not be able to respond. The first are non-permanent or HK, what we just call HKID holders, who are people like me, who've been here for less than 7 years. And then that is factored into the ineligibility. And then the other group is migrant domestic workers. So we have 500,000 or so migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong. Now, we made the choice in this round not to include migrant domestic workers in the sample. This was perhaps the most contentious or the most difficult part of this whole discussion, of this whole plan of whether or not we include this group. In the end, we decided not to, because of the very particular family formation and family characteristics of migrant domestic workers, in terms of only a negligible number of migrant domestic workers will marry and have children in Hong Kong. The overwhelming majority will be either split families or single, with family back in the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Bangladesh to a lesser degree. Also, some issues around language. Whether when we go beyond English and traditional Chinese, do we do this also in Bahasa? Do we do this in Tagalog as well? Issues around access to computing devices as well, having access to a computer, to a desktop computer or a tablet to be able to do this. But on the other hand, we could equally. I'm very much cognizant of the other argument, which is to say, well, this is just excuses, right? These people live in Hong Kong. They can and do have children and families, and so you should include them. But this is this precisely these kind of questions that we'll be talking about when we debrief on this and we talk with. That's why we're talking about it now, right? To learn from what we've done in the pilot, and to make sure that we do the main version as well as we can.
I'll take one last question from the attendees, and it's from Susanna Mackey from Hungary. Susanna. You're still muted. And if Susanna doesn't manage to unmute herself.
Okay, now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. So I have a question concerning the online questionnaire. I would like to know, so it is programmed in Blaze, and I would like to know if you changed something at the appearance of the questionnaire, because it's not, I think that it is not so user-friendly as maybe it could be. So with adding some colors or logos or something like this, maybe it would be a bit nicer. And I would like to know if you changed something at the appearance of the questionnaire. We
didn't change anything. No, we didn't. maybe we are hoping that was what was pushing our high response rate. We made it in like with lots of cartoons in anime or something like this. No, we just have boring old Blaze, white background, black letters, little boxes, dots, just boring Blaze. Nothing wrong with it, but you know, yeah, that's it. No, we didn't jazz it up.
Thanks for the publicity here, Stuart.
No, I mean, I just but like that's great. You know, so even without doing anything to it, it's still
it's good news.
Yeah.
No,
okay, so it's works. Thank you.
Joke apart, this is something that, and hopefully we can report in another webinar in the fall. The French team, which is going to do also a pilot in the fall, they're interested in experimenting with the feel and look. And I think there's likely room for improvement, but it's indeed really interesting to see, Stuart, that without that you achieve some really interesting results. And I think what is particularly interesting is once the people have logged in, that your drop-off was much lower than the others. So did you manage to motivate them more to do the survey even before they started, by having this registered mail, by having, you know, as you said, the logo, all these little things that there's no way we'll ever know what's the key success ingredient, but maybe it's the packaging that apparently motivated enough respondent together with the incentive to carry through, and that's particularly interesting. Yeah,
thanks. Yeah, and I think, Joe, the last thing, I think that when we get more data back, so we'll be able to see drop-off rates by incentive groups, then that's going to be, you know, I think really interesting. That do we see what do you call it, you know, when we have conditional incentives, does that make a difference to the drop-off rate, you know, or it's just we give you the money up front, we do it, and then that's it. I think it'd be very interesting to see. Anyway, sorry.
Great. On that, first of all, I'd like to thank so much Stuart, but also Joy and Ling Ling and the whole team. You did a fabulous job. Thank you very much, and thank you for this webinar, for sharing with us. As I said, we'll be formally now closing the webinar, but if you do have other questions, you want to chat with us, please stay online. If not, we will resume this series of webinar in September, and keep an eye on our newsletter. We will be announcing the forthcoming schedule. So on that, I wish all of you a nice, warm, safe summer. Ciao.